All right, everybody, welcome to the Industry Insights. Today we're talking about producing and pre-production. Is everyone excited? Yes, I hope you're excited. I mean, you're here, you're excited. So today we have our panelists, Candice Buchanan and Sheryl
Hello.
Fountain. Why don't we start with just each of you introducing yourselves? Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background as a producer, and your role working in pre-production. Candice, why don't you go ahead and go first?
So I'm a little bit of a unconventional producer. I've produced films, but I am more along the line of a television producer. So I have a lot of experience with live TV, a lot of experience with live event producing, and reality show stuff, and more international stuff. Um, and I also produce events, like actual event production, not just the visuals producing side, and music videos as well. So I kind of dabble in everything, but if I had to choose a favorite, it would absolutely be documentary and live TV. I love the pressure of live TV. Yeah.
That's shocking. I've
I
never
love
heard
the
anybody
stress.
say that before,
I
ever.
do. I love it because I'm stressed out and I'm done and I'm pissed off and I'm cursing at everybody. Everybody's cursing me, but at the end of it, I'm buying everybody a drink because we got it done.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, Cheryl, what about you?
So mine is a little similar. It's kind of similar to Candace. Most of my experience is in television, but I have produced films, short films, music videos. I think any producer really, to get to the point where they are doing films, they have to do smaller projects, short
Yeah.
films, music videos, really anything that we can get our hands on. And then we move up. And so for me, I ended up doing some international stuff as well, live television that gave me an ulcer. So I'm not like Candace. I don't like the pressure.
Oh, I really do. I love it.
I mean, I don't mind doing it, and it is fun because there's no high like live television. But after having an ulcer, I was like, okay, let's just step back and reevaluate. So my major part of my experience is in scripted television. I've done unscripted, not as much. And then, so I worked at Disney for many years, and then I worked at Quibi. So many of you probably know Quibi for the hot minute that it existed, and just got a lot of experience that way. But honestly, just from a producing perspective, I think just getting any kind of experience really is helpful. And producers are the one kind of person that can really slide in between, especially if you have more experience coming up. Like if you're just in unscripted, you kind of end up in unscripted. If you're just in scripted, you end up in scripted. But if you kind of diversify your experience, you really get a chance to touch everything. So I think that's kind of the funnest part of it, is really being able to touch a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I can piggyback on that. If you don't want to get bored, if you're someone who doesn't like monotony like me, I don't like to do the same thing twice. So I producing along different kinds of projects presents different kinds of challenges, and it allows you to solve different kinds of problems, which is pretty much what you do as a producer. You plan and you solve problems. So yeah, absolutely. Get as much experience as you can doing a little bit of every project, no matter how small, because a big project and a little project usually have similar types of issues. So don't be mad at yourself if you're doing a little small project, because chances are a bigger project might have the exact same problems that you do.
Cool. So what's been one of the best opportunities that you've had as a producer? Like one of your best experiences, best projects you've ever worked on, or even just a project that helped move you into that next big project like you were talking about, Candace?
God, I had some really good opportunities. I can't choose any one thing. I really liked working in home shopping, like the home shopping networks. and producing that live sales environment. It was very stressful, but I enjoyed working with the talent one-on-one, and getting the best out of them, even when they weren't doing their best. I'm talent myself, so I've started out as a television host and then went into producing. And I really, really enjoy working with that and a live studio audience as well, like producing a show with a live audience, with a celebrity and a host, and writing the script and making sure everything goes right and getting onto the studio by a certain time. There were a lot of problems that I had to solve. So I would say I enjoyed both of those, working in a live studio audience environment for a music countdown TV show and working in home shopping. I really, really enjoyed doing those two things.
Awesome. What about you, Sheryl?
I think for me, I mean, I like producing in all types of things, but I think the funnest part for me has been access. So one of the biggest things about a producer is you have to network, because part of being a problem solver, I kind of feel like it's like Olivia Pope, and you're like a fixer. Like you are Olivia Pope all the time. And part of solving problems is knowing exactly who to go to, how to get questions answered, who, you know, if something falls out in the last minute, how to get that location. If someone gets fired, if like I had an issue one time where we had a show and they had a fire coming across the one road that would go to where our whole base was. So how would we get someone out before the fire, you know, would hit them in LA? Do we have to have a helicopter? You know, how soon can we, you know, so there's all these logistics. And because of that, you have to know so many people. So as a producer, it's really, really, really helpful to network as much as possible. But the benefit of networking is not just, you know, how to get somebody out in case of fire, or, you know, how to find a location last minute, is the access. And so I had a friend of mine who was, I believe he was a grip on one of my shows. And he was like, hey, come here. I'm working on, it was like right before a show was about to start, and he was working on another show. And oh no, it wasn't a grip. He was our caterer. That's what it was. He was our caterer, and he was catering another show. And so he pulls me over to the other set, and I walked onto the set of Parks and Rec. And it was the coolest experience. I got to like walk through all the sets because there was nobody there, and I had full access to whoever I wanted, you know, to look at and like close up. And then the other one was I was going to Ireland, and one of my friends set me up with the director of photography for Game of Thrones. And so I was actually able to walk through the entire set. And season 7, episode 1, I was actually in the arches in the throne room behind the mountain. So like he was coming out, if you've ever seen it, and he was standing like right next to me complaining about his costume. So because it was like hurting his knees or something. So the access to technology, the access to how people do things differently, the access to different processes and procedures is just phenomenal as a producer, because usually you're kind of more boxed in other positions. And as a producer, you kind of have to know everything about other positions and other people and what they do. So that's really, for me, the part that is very exciting about producing.
That's really cool. You mentioned, I think networking, you know, is obviously a very, very important part of any part of this industry. Do you have any tips for like how do you cultivate like really good relationships with either vendors or other people in the industry? Because you know, obviously you can meet all these people, but you also need to be likable as a producer to a certain extent. So how does that play out for the two of you?
Be a kind person, be approachable. Always, no matter how bad your day is, if someone walks up to you and you have no idea who they are, no matter how they look, they could look homeless. Embrace them, because you never know who they know, and you never know who they are. And not everybody comes across clean cut and beautiful and looking like they have access, right? I'll give you an example of solving a problem and having, you know, being able to solve a problem just because I was nice to somebody. You guys know I'm from Jamaica, so I was producing a television show that aired in 15 countries there, and it's very time sensitive. The daily lottery has to be shot at a certain time, so I have to get out of the studio. Studio audience, host, everybody has to get out by 4 o'clock. Whether or not I'm done shooting, everybody has to be out by 4 because the lottery company pays for the studio at that time. And if I'm in there, I'm fired, okay? So I have an artist who's a big Caribbean artist. His name's Beanie Man. I don't know how many of you guys know Beanie Man, but he's a huge, huge, huge international artist. He has a song with Janet Jackson and some other people. So he's a star, and we know how stars are, right? You understand, Sheryl. So he's to be there at 1. It's 2 o'clock and he's still not here. He's not answering his phone. I have a studio audience, I have a host, and I have to get out at 4. So there was a lady I met maybe 3 or 4 weeks before. Didn't look like much. She was really scruffy, whatever. And I was at an event, I was backstage, and we were both talking to each other, and she was telling me about her kids and da-da-da-da. And she gave me her number, and she was like, oh, well, call me if you ever need anything, blah, blah, blah. So I called her because I was desperate, right? I saw her talking to him at the event. And so I called her, I was like, where can you help me? I need to find him. I need to know where he is. I need to know if he's coming so I can come up with a different version of this show. He called, it turns out she was the mother of his child. And so she called him and gave him the business, and he was there in less than 15 minutes. Because I was nice to her. She turned out to be the mother of his children, and he got there in no time. Everybody was like, Candice, how the hell did you pull that off? He never shows up. I was like, well, you got to know the wife. That's how you get it done. So that's an example of just a little chat backstage with someone I didn't know. Took her number, even though I didn't know what I would need it for, and having the foresight to remember, oh, I saw her talking to him. I think she knows him. I'm desperate. It can't hurt to call, right? And I made that call and I solved the problem and I didn't get fired. So again, these are examples of relationships that you build that you never know when you can call on people or call on them for something.
Yeah, I think I would add.
Perfect example for that too. I had this customer that everybody used to think was homeless, and just the way he dressed, he was like, you know, kind of like a hippie, kind of had tattered clothes and stuff. And it turned out the guy was actually a millionaire, and he tipped me $1,000 for Christmas.
Wow.
But everybody thought he was homeless, but he wasn't. He just liked to dress that way. Everybody treated him so badly, and there was no point.
You never know. You never know. People know.
Yeah, for me, I used to work before I was a producer. I worked in corporate, and then I was a jury consultant. Very random about my life, but I picked juries for multi-million-dollar attorneys, and so I was working with them, and the person that owned our company was this huge attorney. He basically ran the town I lived in, and he was very politically connected. So all the parties and stuff I would go to all had politicians. And in one of the parties, I knew this politician from Maryland, and he told me, he said, the best advice I could ever give you is how to network correctly. I was like, okay. And he said, the best way is to not just meet someone, but meet them because you want to meet them, get to know them because you want to get to know them. And even if it's someone who can never, ever help you, you never know, that person might help you 20 years down the road. but you are always meeting people and being, like Candice said, being kind to them and saying, hey, I genuinely care about you. Or like I had a friend of mine who was a producer when I first got to LA, and producers, we go up and down, sometimes we're on a high, producers are, they could win to, the movie of the year or the Oscar for the best picture one year, and then they have nothing for 10 years. And they are literally, trying to just make ends meet. And that's just kind of how our business runs. And I had a friend of mine who was a producer kind of like that. He ran a company, was great. His company went belly up, and he would be at a Starbucks every day working on his next big thing. And the one thing I remembered about him is that he was really passionate about the specific, it was like a children's nonprofit, because his son was had this it was like some kind of a gene issue, and but I don't know what it's called. So anyway, I would always remember that about him, and I would always say, hey, could you always send me more information about it? Or, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And I would always have like that one little tidbit to remember who he was, how to remember him, how's his son doing, how is, his participation in the nonprofit. So there was always those things that I would remember and connect. And he told me, it was like probably, because I was in LA for about 10 years, and he told me, he was like, you're one of the few people that keep remembering about this. And you don't ask me like, hey, when can I get a job? Or, do you have anything available? It was just, hey, how can I connect with you as a human being? And that has been, and that is at every single level. It doesn't have to be the producer. It doesn't have to be, honestly, the person that helped me get to LA was someone who I had met. I was catering when I was in grad school. I worked on a catering company, and I had met a director in the catering company, at the wedding I was catering. And when I went to LA 3 years later, he became a director of one of my shows. And so, and he and I have been friends ever since. So it doesn't matter. Sometimes, I have friends who are construction guys who were on my set who I was like, can I pay you to make me a table? Like random things, just because you're friends. And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll help you out. And it's just that personal, relationship of just saying, hey, you're a human being, I'm a human being, let's hang out. And yeah, we have a professional life, but I want to actually get to know you as to get to know you. And that will let them bend over backwards for you, because they know, number one, you're nice. Number two, that you really care about them when you do have to chew them out. And number three, that, at the end of the day, it's business and it's not personal. And I think honestly, that has constantly been the saving grace of networking for me.
I really want to touch on that, if you don't mind, Jon.
No, yeah, go for it.
She said something and she kind of just glossed over it, chew you out. Understand, we are the most hated people on a set because it is our job to chew you out. We do the hiring and the firing, and we keep the job on time, under budget, or else. And because it's our butt that's on the line, for want of a better word, we end up, we have fire on our back. And so we've got to roll that down the hill, right? Because if you don't do what you need to do, and if you're not on time, and if we waste any more money, I got to go to executive producers who are going to have my neck for you not doing your job, even though it's not my fault. That's the job of a producer. Everything that happens on that production is on you, whether it's your fault or not. So if you're thin-skinned, maybe don't produce. Understand that it is when you're under pressure, especially in live TV, oh my gosh. there are crazy things being yelled in your ear when live TV is going on. There's confusion, there's people yelling, there are lots of curse words, and people get angry. But at the end of the day, we all understand that it's love. We have a job to do. We all have to do it. Yes, you made a mistake, but your mistake can cost the entire team dearly. So try not to take offense when you get chewed out. Sometimes in the heat of the moment and the pressure, producers really do snap. And if and when you become producers, you will understand the pressure and you'll understand what's at stake and why that happens. It's not because we're mean, it's because we're in trouble.
Especially when you deal with like safety issues, as seasoned producers, I've had people commit suicide on sets. I've had people, have amputations on sets. I've had, there's a lot of things that we have gone through as producers that we have experienced from, like I said, with the fire to, everything else. And when we jump on somebody's case, it's not because it's all about you. It's like, we know our job is to foresee the kind of the future. It's our job to kind of say, okay, if this action continues, you will cause this, because we have seen it on 15 other sets.
Yes.
And so that's part of the reason why we are so passionate and so forthright in what we say when we are trying to,
get you to do what you need to do.
make corrections. And, because we know where it will lead. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the difference between someone who hasn't produced before and someone who's a seasoned producer, is we can step in and truly foresee those problems happening when at the very beginning.
I have a story that a student gave me. I had a student come through the program. I think he graduated now. He worked on the set of The Walking Dead. Was it The Walking Dead? Yes, he was working on The Walking Dead. And that's another thing. Network with your peers, because you don't know what they do for a living. Some of them hide what they do, and they're doing really big things. So always make friends with your peers, even the ones who are getting C's and seem like they're not doing well. When I was in film school, all the students who got C's and D's are the ones who are working in LA right now. So just so you know, because a lot of times they're just busy and they're not able to finish everything for, when they need to, because they're doing other things. So just note to selves, don't scoff on the C students. Okay. Some of them are doing big things. Okay. So this student lives in Philly. He had a shoot. He knew he had the shoot the next day. He was driving to probably an hour away, but this is the height of winter, snowstorms, lots of crazy stuff going on, right? So there was a snowstorm. He got into a car accident. He didn't show up for work. He called, and when he did show up for work the next day, he showed up with a police report and everything, and they fired him. I see all these faces on here and they're going, what? Who can tell me why they fired him?
I don't have a clue.
Okay, anybody want to guess why they fired him?
He wasn't doing a good job.
Well, he wasn't there, right? He wasn't physically there.
Yeah,
and his job was very, very important. His job, him not being there, delayed the shoot by a day. And this wasn't the set of The Walking Dead. This was a set of something else. So let me not scare you from The Walking Dead. But that shoot had like $50,000 a day. So that's a $50,000 mishap. You can't just gloss over that. I'm sorry you got into a car accident, but you could have come the day before and booked a hotel because you're getting paid enough, right? And booked a hotel very close by, and you could have walked to set. Do you see what I'm saying? Now that sounds really extreme and harsh, but sometimes that's how it is. He cost the production a lot of money by not showing up. So even in your jobs, if you're a grip, if you're whatever, if you know your job is important, if you have a shoot, that's a really good tip. Get a hotel nearby. So acts of God cannot make you miss an important, especially a huge production like that.
Yeah.
Make sense? And he actually, and I like this about this kid, he understood why they fired him. What I didn't like is the producer blacklisted him, which was mean. So he couldn't get work in Philly for like 2 years. And this happens sometimes. Yeah, that guy was mean. But now he's working on The Walking Dead and he's doing well. But he told his story in my class and I thought, oh my goodness, this is a teachable moment for students for sure. Because sometimes you get a producer who's just a mean person and will do stuff like that, you know? But that was a very, very high budget film. I mean, they had a lot of cranes there and they had explosions and it was a lot of money that was being spent that day. And he pushed the whole production back by a day. I think 2 days because they had some weather or something, but they lost a lot of money, like 50 grand is what he said. And that's a lot of money to lose on a project. Right, Sheryl?
It is. I mean,
lot of money to
generally
lose.
on the films, it's usually, it depends on the budget of the film, but it could be 50,000, it could be 150,000, it could be 250,000 a day. So it really depends on, you know, who's the actors, you know, the location. It's very, yeah, it's very, very important. And it's also hard when you have a smaller film that you don't have backups for. Because, you know, if this person had, you know, this job, but then maybe he had someone who was training or somebody with him or in the same department and they could step in for a few hours while he was dealing with the car accident, great. But if there's no one there, especially when you have small films, you know, for many students who have, you know, capstone projects, this has happened over and over and over again, where they don't have backups. They don't have a backup actor. They don't have a backup, you know, crew. They don't have, and all of a sudden they come to the very last week of when they're supposed to put their pre-production together or their production together, and they are on a deadline, you know, because you're trying to graduate and they're on a deadline, and all of a sudden their whole project just blows up and they get frustrated and disappointed because their project gets blown up and they don't have even a backup project. You know what I mean? So there's many times where I've actually had to talk to students and say, hey, how can we figure out how to fix your project to where maybe it's not exactly what you wanted, but it's close enough to where you have the same goal. Because again, we are producers, we are fixers, we fix problems. We have the same goal, we get the same resolution to the problem, but maybe it wasn't in the same vision. And I think that you kind of have to look at it from the perspective of, and this kind of might go into a whole nother area, but there was a script one time we got, and we didn't have a ton of money for this script. And I read the very first page. The very first page was $1 million. First page. There was a boat, there was a mermaid, there, you know, so you have special effects and you had costumes. We had a storm. We had, yeah, Candice's face is like about to blow.
Oh my God.
We had a storm. We had, so it's like in the water, storm, boat, mermaid, helicopter.
Oh, the insurance must be nuts on that.
We had rappelling from the helicopter onto the boat. I mean, this is all first page. And
It's like the opening scene to the Suicide Squad.
right.
I'm saying, oh my goodness.
So
Who wrote the script, Rambo?
what?
Who wrote the script, Rambo?
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like, it was literally, to Ace's point, Mission Impossible, because we were like, we don't have this money for one page. And it was it was a TV show. So it was like 47 pages. And so we were like, okay, well, how do we do this? Fortunately, it was in the dark. So it was at night. So what we did is we called, tapping into networking, we called one of our sister studios and said, how do you do this on a ship that you're doing on a current show right now? Because they had a ship in their current show. And they said that they took the top of the ship and they put it on a roller on the stage. And then they would take that same top and they would put it on a fifth wheel or an 18-wheeler, and they would roll it out and put it on a barge in the water. So if they needed something that was water-based, they would put the same top back and forth between the stage and that. And then we rappelled off of the side of the stage, like the top of the stage. So we took them dropping onto the boat from the top of the stage. And then there was also the helicopter was actually just like VFX and, kind of like lighting. And then we heard the sound. And then we had like a drop in of helicopter graphics. And then for the water and stuff, we used that all on stage. So literally it went from $1 million to 150,000 just by being creative. And I think that's the biggest thing for producers. As Candice and I were like, oh, producing is so hard, it's so hard. But that is the point in producing that is fascinating, is being to take something that seems completely impossible and, and working with a director, working with the writer and saying, okay, how can we do the same thing? How can we show exactly your vision, but in a way that is so creative that no one would know the difference between $1 million shot or, a scene and $150,000 scene. And that is the fun part of producing.
That's really cool. I like that you brought this up because this is actually kind of leading into my next question that I was going to ask, which is like, I think people often think that producing is just business. It's like logistics and planning and a bunch of paperwork and, maybe some management and stuff like that. But producers do often get to be creative like that. So if you had to define the term creative producing and like how else you get to be creative as a producer, what would some of those things be?
I feel like Sheryl really just answered that, right? Is finding creative ways to, because your job is really to keep everything on the budget or get things done as cheaply as possible with as best quality as possible, and while still being able to tell the story and affect the audience in a believable way. So anything that allows you to especially you guys are students, you guys are going to be doing a lot of creative producing. You're going to be finding ways to do things or shoot things or cheat your shots and stuff. It maybe not in such a large monetary way as what Sheryl was talking about, but maybe it's in a smaller way, right? Maybe you have one wall that's like this blue and you're in a different room, and then you turn to a different wall and it's a different color, and you're gonna act like that's a totally different room, but you're in the same room. You've got a different set here, but then you got a different set here, and then there's a different set over there on that wall, and you're using one room to do 3 different shots, right? That's kind of being creative and solving problems in a creative way, Also, I find coming up with creative shots is important. Lots of those little close-ups, little things like adding little things will add value to your story. So like if someone goes through a door, you're gonna get their hands on the door, you're gonna get them turning the knob, you're gonna get them pushing the door, you're gonna get them walking through the door, a wider shot of them walking through the door. Maybe you get their face, maybe you get, so sometimes adding more shots helps with the believability of your story as well. Because people feel like they're there and they're doing it. Audio is another way that you can be super creative. One of my friends, Rui, works for The Walking Dead again. Yes, I know a lot of people there. So
Just the whole crew there.
right? So Rui is the sound designer, and he came up with the sound for when zombies crunch bones. Pretty much he is super creative as a sound designer, and the producer kind of came to him and said, all right, listen, I don't want animals, I don't want the zombies to sound like an animal. We've got to figure this out without you having to like go to a zoo and listen to lions chomp, record lions chomping on stuff. We got to do this now, turn it around and get this done. And Rui said, okay, let's do this. And they tried out different sounds. And at the end of it, it ended up being carrots submersed in mayonnaise and just breaking carrots with his hands and getting it at different levels, different distances, and then editing that all together. And that's what, so if you're squeamish about zombies, that's exactly what he used for the zombies eating flesh, because there's no such thing as a zombie. He had to come up with that. And so it's mayonnaise and carrots, pretty much. And like The Day After Tomorrow is another thing. So as producers, you've got to come up with creative ways to do stuff. So for The Day After Tomorrow, not The Day After Tomorrow, what's the name of that movie? End of Days? One of those End of Days movies. There's a scene where the ocean comes up and swallows Washington, D.C. Right? It was one of those apocalypse films. And you guys know which film I'm talking about. I'm looking at it, but I can't.
That happened in 2012. Is that the movie?
Yes, that's the one. Right. That's the movie, 2012. So that scene where the wave comes up and swallows Washington, D.C., obviously we don't know what that sounds like. So Rui came up with Coca-Cola cans and bottles, and that fizzy sound of the ocean coming up over Washington, D.C. is Rui opening bottle cans and messing with the sound a lot to make it happen. And all of that came from his producer sitting with him and needing him to come up with something super cheap. They didn't want to pay a lot of money to get somebody to create that sound or to get that sound done. So he came up with something really quick, really cheap, and that was awesome. That's kind of some examples that I'm giving you from more of a like in post kind of vibe, because yes, they have the visuals, but sound is also very, very important. And a lot of people don't know that producers actually sit in your editing as well. We sit in on editing. We make decisions on editing. The director's cut really can't claim out of solving conflicts. That's number one. What we do in the editing suite is solve conflicts between the director and the editor. They are always fighting, and we always have to come up with creative ways to feed the director's ego and calm our editor at the same time. So that's why I kind of led into sound, because that's a big part of also what we do, is helping to make those decisions as well, and okaying what they come up with.
Okay. I got a quick question for you. With the
go ahead.
writers and producers, now does the producer affect the writer? Can they tell the writer how to do it, or what? I mean,
Yes and no. So it depends on the project. It
Okay.
depends on the project. So it depends if it's a film that is so very that the writer has already written and they've already gotten it greenlit. Sometimes what can happen is the producer can need a rewrite or a of a certain section or something like that. I sometimes that happens, but usually because that's in like development, they do kind of work together to kind of get the film accepted, so to speak, by studios. You want to
Okay.
elaborate on that, Sheryl?
Yeah, so writing is actually really interesting in film because it's very different from television. Film, you usually write your film, submit it, they buy it, you move forward.
Yeah.
There is an interesting collaboration at the point of purchase, meaning that the studio can purchase it outright and you have nothing from that point on, meaning that you are not going to rewrite, you're not going to do any kind of polish, you're not going to do anything to the script. If they change the script, if it's more than, I believe, 70% of, like, meaning more than 30%. So if you've written 70% and there's 30% changes, then they don't have to put a co-writer. If it's more than 70% change, then they have to do you as the first writer and then whoever's doing the changes as the second writer.
Mm-hmm.
So in that point, this is where a lot of writers get very frustrated when they sell their script because, and this is the reason why a lot of writers like to hold on to the creative rights to it, because you can write a script. If 30% of your script is rewritten, that's a huge percentage. And you could have an entire different ending. You can have an entire different beginning. You can have an entire different middle, but your beginning and ending is the same. Now you have a completely different film.
Mm-hmm.
And it still has your name on it. And it had nothing to do with what you wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So from a writer's perspective, you want to, producers can bring someone in, like, if I got a film, like I have a film, I was thinking of like questions, like if somebody asked me a question, I'm going to just tell you it because it relates to this. But if I were to produce anything right now, or if I were to decide to produce something, one of my really, really, really good friends passed away last year from cancer in her 30s. And she wrote a script before she died. And it wasn't completely done. It was about 85% done. So if I were to produce that, I would have to get the rights from her family or her estate. And then I would need to hire another writer to do either a polish or to finish it up. So this is a really good example because a lot of times you can get books, like book rights and things like that from people who have passed away, and then you make some adjustments to it. So I'll use this as a good example. So for that, I would have the rights to the project. I would need to change probably good 30% because that's about the amount that she didn't finish before she passed. And then I would need to, I'd go in and I would produce it. So it wouldn't be exactly what she wanted, but I would know the essence of what she wanted based on her original notes and her script. And then, but the secondary writer doesn't get credit. So if you're a polisher, if you are someone just hired on to rewrite, you might be someone who's really good in character development. You might be really good in outlining. You might be really good in polishing. And so as writers, we don't get a film purchased every single day. So a lot of writers will get hired as polishers, rewriters, character development, whatever, just to punch up a script. So many writers in LA or New York, other places. Atlanta is a good place they're starting to develop a lot of stuff. It's a really good place to find these other jobs to get experience working on scripts. And then when you have your own script, people are like, oh yeah, you punched up this script. I really loved it. It was great. So kind of to that perspective, and that, hopefully answering your question from a script perspective, it's very, very, very rare. Like, I don't think I've ever seen it that an original script never got touched after it got purchased.
Right.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
A lot of times they will hire the person on and say, okay, we give you, because I don't know, a lot of people know this, but I also work in the legal department for Disney Channel. So I do a lot of agreements and things like that. So in a lot of the agreements, there will be information on writers saying you will be hired, or the script will be purchased, and then you will be doing 1 rewrite or 2 rewrites or whatever. And then that is in the amount that we're paying you to purchase a script. So there, depending on the negotiation and the contract that you have with them, it will depend on if they want you to rewrite or to punch it up.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
that's a very long answer, but hopefully that helps.
It does. I mean, I'm gonna have to take a class of what you was talking about on polishing, rewriting and polishing or something.
Yeah, I don't actually teach that. That's just something that I know. So I'm sure that in the writing classes, they teach on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, for the last little bit of time that we had left, I'd love to open it up to some questions. Stephen, you just raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of on the same topic of and producers, maybe off well, what would be y'all's advice on if we had a script finish? How would you advise starting the networking to try to get it funded? From your experience, that the scripts you worked with and your experience with producing.
Candice, you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
I want you to take it, because
Okay.
the only thing I
have a little I can add to that too when you're done, Sheryl.
I have actually an entire section in DFM 190 that we talk about this, which is fun. Yeah, so basically there's a lot of different things. I personally, for independent films, smaller, short independent films, grants are amazing. Like if you can find something that is very niche, like I think it's like the GI Film Festival or something like that is a really good one for military. They do have finishing grants. So if you can get enough money to, start the project, but you need to finish, meaning you need money for post, music, credits, graphics, anything like that, they have a lot of finishing grants. Women in Film have grants. The Hollywood Radio Television Society has grants. There's an entire website just for grants. And it really depends. There's grants for documentaries, there's grants, like all kinds of stuff. So that's a really good way to just get free money. Now, when I say that, you have to submit into these grants. So you need to have a full budget. You need to have a good log line. You need to have a good presentation. So we talk about that all in DFM 190. I will have to look it up for you. I will do that as soon as I finish talking, and then I will put it in. I get it in my email. So it's like an email list that I'm on. So that's a good one. Friends and family is also helpful. GoFundMe is a good one that a lot of people use. Another one is the film. There are initiatives for student films in your area. So like when I went to grad school in Virginia, so we have the Virginia Alliance, Film Alliance, and they would have a grant every year that would help with just making films. So sometimes depending on the area that you're in, they may have that. Yeah, there is crowdfunding. There's, I can actually just, I can go find the whole list and send it in the comments. But yeah, there's a bunch of ways to do it. It's just, it really depends on what your project is and how much time you have to work on it. Because in LA Film School, you only have a certain amount of time in your courses. But if you're making something independently outside of LA Film, I think this is a really good way to go, because then you can take the time to develop your project, really make a professional pre-visualization, which is basically what I teach in DFM 190, and then provide that. And the pre-visualization provides basically a visual look of your project and then your budget. And then they can be like, wow, this is really great. I mean, I've applied for grants up to $35,000 for a short film. So the money is out there and they do want to give it out. So you just have to go and find it.
Right. I mean, just a little more detail. A buddy of mine, we co-wrote a Western together, and it's currently sitting with an interested investor. We're waiting to hear back, but I don't want to have one of those, all our eggs in one basket kind of moments, and just kind of seeing what else might be out there to really, start pushing. And we want to make this happen.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Also,
we put time into it. So
tapping into networking, connecting with the right people. I mean, it might not be for this project, but I know Reba McEntire wants to be in a Western. There's an article about her writing in it. And I'm not saying that she's the right person for your project. I'm just saying if your project does really, really well and you're like, wow, I just won a bunch of film festivals with my project and it was a Western. And then through networking down the road, you have another Western in your back pocket and it's a really good, film, and it's going to be a lot of money. You could be like, hey, Reba, do you want to be in it? Or do you want to sponsor, because I need some funding? And, again, this is, you don't just plan for your current film, you plan for your 50th film at the same time. That's the job of a producer, is you're not just planning for your current career, you're planning for your career in 25 years. Mm-hmm. So all your decisions are making from now on.
Yep.
I'm going to stop talking for a second because I'm going to try to find this.
I think that's great advice. And I always give the advice to, if you have the ability, shoot a proof of concept. I think having any material that you can show is always very helpful. I mean, that's what I've done in my career. And it always just, if you can show that you can make something even 5 minutes and you did it for $1,000, people will be more inclined to give you money to go from there. Leonard, you had your hand up for a while.
I did. Hi, my name is Leonard, and I've forgotten my question, so I put down my hand.
Oh, that's all right. Does anybody else have questions?
Mm-hmm.
If not, I have a couple closing questions we can get to.
Well,
don't be trying to ask questions. It's a safe space, people.
I know.
Ask your questions.
Usually lots of questions.
Yeah.
What is producing in general? I mean, what exactly does producers do again in general? I mean, I know I know that they help solve problems. They hire the directors and everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll sum it up for you. So a producer is in charge of the entire project from the start to the finish. They're in charge of all 5 production stages. Okay. So they're in charge of they start working in the first stage, right? Which is development, which is, they get the script, they shop the script, they try to get people to invest in the script, and they try to get it funded, right? In traditional Hollywood terms, that means greenlit. Once it gets a budget, then they can start going to the next stage, which of course, is pre-production, then production, which is when we film everything, post-production, where we put everything together, and then the marketing and distribution side, which is deciding where we're going to release, how we're going to release, who are the people we're going to release to. Now, in recent times, that has been kind of turned on its head because of the whole independent filmmaking structure. So a lot of times, endorsement deals that usually are done at the end with like McDonald's and so on, that stuff is done at the beginning to get money from McDonald's to do things like product placement. So for example, Mission Impossible, every time they do a different installment of Mission Impossible, there's a different car that's in there. That's a super car, that's a super luxury car, or James Bond, right? And it's these people pay money before production to be in the production, right? And these deals are made no longer at the back end, they're made at the front in development to help to fund the film, right? So all those things are under the purview of the production department, of the producing department, I should say, which is a very large department with lots of people working in there. There's a UPM, and there are people doing accounting, and there are people doing other stuff. But the producer's job is to get the story told under budget, on time, under budget, and be most effective with the audience. So it must be done well. And you can have one producer on a project, you can have many producers on a project. Some films have Hollywood films have 5 producers on one project because it's so large and there's so much to manage. So in pre-production, a producer is in charge of making sure that all the departments are meeting, they're working together, they have all the resources they need to plan for the film. On the days when the film is being shot, a producer can be outing fires. They're literally working on, like Sheryl said, making sure that because of this fire, everybody's safe and they can airlift people out of there if they need to, or you know, somebody didn't talk to the sheriff in the town and now he's upset and thinks we don't have a permit when we have a permit, and just outing fires so that you guys can work, okay? Making sure it's comfortable enough so people on set can work without a problem. They're solving issues with actors, and the grip guys are pissed off, and the actor is not coming on set because their mother left them or something, I don't know. But we're always running around trying to keep the project on time and under budget all the time. I already told you some of the things we go through in post-production, and of course, distribution. You know, you still got to rally the troops to be marketing this film and getting the correct deals and making sure everybody's doing what it is that they need to do for the project to get out there. So a producer is, think of the film as a business. The producer is the CEO. And then everybody else is doing, so the operations manager is yeah, that's the producer too, come to think of it. I was trying to give the director a job.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good way of describing it.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time, but I'd like to get to the last 2 questions that we have here. So Ace, you go ahead, and then we'll go to Jeffrey's question, and then we'll end it there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So like I mentioned in the chat, so I think directing is more of my comfort zone. So like whenever it comes to producing, it's like a big don't touch lava type situation. So like I think there's a lot of like business aspects of like producing that I don't understand yet, or probably that I'm too afraid to get into, because you know that's the whole other thing with paying actors and handling funding. So what sources would you go to like be able to understand that? So is that more like a business school type thing that you need to know before you get to that side?
No, not at all. I mean, I went to business school. I have an MBA from Syracuse. So I went to business school, but I was a producer long before I went to business school. As long as you understand the paperwork, to be honest, we have very, very good classes here at LA Film School. You're going to be exposed to classes that are going to teach you how we actually do it in the industry. You'll be using the actual paperwork, and we're going to make sure that you understand the why behind each piece of paper. So it's a lot of paperwork, but there is a why behind it. And I know in Sheryl's classes and my classes, we both kind of try to get you to understand like why you need a previs. Why do you need to have a budget? why do you need to have all these things on paper sorted out? And the main reason, for example, a shooting schedule or a script breakdown, right? You're breaking it down because you need everybody on the same page. There needs to be a document that tells everybody what they need to be doing on the day. So for example, if there needs to be a car, then that department knows that the car needs to be there on shooting day 2 at X time. Makeup and hair knows, okay, we're gonna do zombie makeup today, so we've got to bring the zombie makeup on that day. So having the paperwork in place allows you to communicate with everybody without having to communicate with everybody physically, right? You're still going to talk to everybody, yes, but it gives you a proper plan in place. So all the heads of department and all the people within each department knows exactly what they need to do, and your film runs a whole lot smoother. So I know a lot of you guys are going, you're afraid of the business side or the paperwork, but we will absolutely get you to a point where once you understand the why, then it becomes a lot easier for you. So you're breaking down the script because you need to talk to all these departments. And instead of calling each one of these department heads and saying, okay, makeup, we're doing zombie on day 1, day 2, day whatever, at what time, and this is the scene that we're shooting. It's all already there on paper. All they have to do is look at it. Takes more pressure off of you. Does that make sense?
I think the biggest thing is organization, because I think the biggest thing that scares most people in production is they see all of this work and they're like, and everybody panics. Because as a director, because Candice and I have directed ourselves, we've edited. I'm not the best editor, I will tell you that. I am not great, but that's the reason why I have people. So, that can edit. But I personally, I have dealt into writing, I've done directing, I've done directing multicam, I've directed live television. So I think it's really helpful for producers to do other things to really understand their skill sets. But when you're in that director role and you have that hat on, you are creative. You're looking at your shots, you're looking how beautiful it's going to be, the vision. You're not thinking of, okay, how am I going to get actor A from New York to LA by a certain amount of time, make sure that they're comfortable, make sure, you're just thinking, oh, how pretty is this shot? And the producer is the one digging into the weeds of the details of everything. If that scares you, it's okay. It scares us all. It really does. Especially at the very beginning of the project, you're just like, oh, no, why am I doing this? Why did I do this? Every time. But my background was in business as well. I got my undergrad in business. I got my master's in film. And I think the biggest thing is taking it one step at a time, learning how to build a checklist. That's what I teach in DFM 190 now. How to build a checklist, how to organize your time, try to find time management. When you are shooting your film, there are all these skills that you're already using as a director. You're already trying to figure out time management. You're already trying to figure out how long do I have to be able to shoot this shot? How much time before the sun sets. You're always already trying to figure out how to organize your shots, how to organize your storyboards, how to organize your actors and where they're going to be. You have all those skill sets as a creative. Like most people are like, oh, no, I don't have those skill sets. You do. It's just that they are seen very differently. And one piece of advice that I got from one of my friends at Disney Imagineering was, when you're trying to solve a problem, look at it like, I always visualize it in my head as if I'm at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And when you're at different areas, you're seeing different perspectives of the city. And so when you're trying to figure out a problem, maybe I haven't dealt with a problem before, a specific problem before as a producer, but I've dealt with it as a director. And I'm like, ooh, how did I figure that out as a director? And how can I translate it into producing to make sure that that fixes the problem? And I think that's the biggest thing, is to not scare you when you're trying to produce your own projects, is looking at it from the perspective of, you know, how do I do this? You know, you may have something that's not even film related. Maybe you have something in your job that you do every single day. I had a student who was a truck driver, and he was doing his documentary, and he was like, I don't know, I'm always in the truck. And I was like, and I don't know what to do. And I said, do you have a GoPro? Do you have an iPhone? I was like, just shoot yourself talking, you know, try to, you know, it's interesting. Like, I don't know what an inside of a truck looks like. You know, I would be interested in listening and understanding what you do all day as you're in the cab of a truck, you know, like, think of it, even in your own everyday life, you have things in your life and in your heart and in the things that you do every day that are fascinating to everybody else around you, but you just don't know because you do it every day. So take those skill sets and roll it into producing, and it's going to be so much easier.
And to touch on that, the paperwork will help you on shoot day.
Yes, it will.
You will be so much more organized. You would have thought of so many potential problems and solve them in your paperwork, so that when you're shooting, when you're directing your independent projects, everything's already handled. You've done your Olivia Pope, and now you're doing your creative thing. You're focusing on the lighting, you're focusing on the talent, you're focusing on the performance of your actors, you're focusing on other things, because no one will be bothering you about permits. You've done that already. Nobody will be bothering you about you won't have to worry about people showing up, because you've already done that already, right? You won't have to worry about food or crafty or anything like that, because that's taken care of already in pre-production. You've done all of that with your paperwork. You know everything's in place, and all you have to do is focus on the creative side and telling your story in the best, most beautiful way possible, because you've done the paperwork. You've handled your problem.
Doing that paperwork is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey, you've had your hand raised for a while, so why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, my question is more from like the line producer side. As a line producer, how many times have you heard about them having to actually step in physically to take over a certain aspect of the production process to make sure it gets complete and moves to the next step?
That's a really good question. It doesn't happen in film very often. It does happen in television. I'll give you two examples, one film, one TV. TV, I had a really good friend of mine who was an editor. He started as an editor, the same person that I said earlier that I met when I was catering in grad school. He was, when I met him, he was a producer on Gossip Girl in New York. So he was producing Gossip Girl. He was originally, prior to that, an editor. He had been editor for about 10 years. Then he became a producer, and he wanted to direct. That is his ultimate goal, was to direct. And the director got sick. And the day that the director got sick, they were shooting two scenes. Okay. So one scene was a scene in Grand Central Station with over 100 extras. And the second scene was a funeral scene with over 100 extras. So for a director or even a producer to step in the middle of those scenes is daunting, because you have so many things going on. And there were two of the biggest scenes in the entire season. And the director ended up being sick, but they didn't have anybody else. And they knew that this producer had been doing directing stuff on the side. He'd done some, shorts. He had, kind of told the network and everybody else, hey, I'd love to direct if any opportunity kind of came up, but he was a great producer, and they ended up just giving him the opportunity. Now, did he have his name on that episode? No, he didn't, because that wasn't his job. He wasn't hired to be a director. he was hired to step in on these 2 scenes, and the director did the rest of them. But the director was so happy with them that he went to the team and said, hey, this producer did so great, you should give him at least 1 episode next year to direct. So that's how sometimes line producers will step in. Generally, they step in just to get a new director, especially if there's one, they have enough time. On a film, there was a film called, I believe it was called Platoon. I think it was Platoon. It was a Vietnam-based film in 70s, 80s, and they fired their director 3 times. They
hired him again?
No, they fired and like 3 different directors.
Oh, I was like, wait a minute, I'm not rehiring a director.
Yeah. So the first one, I think the first one ended up quitting randomly. The second one got sick and quit or got fired. There was some kind of situation. And then the third one ended up getting fired. And finally, the producers said, we're in the middle of Vietnam. We're in these swamps. We're, we got it. We have a specific time. We have a specific budget. We have to get this done. It was a tough shoot, very difficult. And they just kept losing directors. And finally, they called, it was it was like a Steven Spielberg of the day. It wasn't Steven Spielberg because he was very young back then, but it was somebody who was a known director and said, can you step in and do this? And they said yes. And they stepped in and done that, and became the director. There was a film recently that, was it Star Wars? There's some film.
Star Wars has fired every director almost.
There was one film that, what's his name? Ron Howard directed recently.
Yeah. That was the Solo movie.
Yes. So
fired Chris Lord and.
Yeah. So I know the story behind that, and like personally, but because of that situation, Kathleen Kennedy was actually having lunch with Ron Howard and just was like, hey, this is what's going on. I can't believe this, blah, 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 this director, yada, yada, yada. And Ron's like, I have always wanted to direct a Star Wars movie. Can I step in? I will cancel my vacation in the south of France and I will finish this movie. And that's what happened. So there, a lot of times, and Kathleen Kennedy was the producer on the film. So a lot of times it doesn't happen very often that a producer will actually step in and take that director role. Almost never. TV, it can happen, but it's more about giving the opportunity to someone who is actually a director. I hope that answers the question.
It did. Thank you.
Cool.
Welcome.
That's fantastic. Well, we are fresh out of time, but I'd love to ask one quick question to end everything. And that would be, if you could produce any movie, what would it be?
Star Trek, for sure. I'm a Trekkie, y'all.
Nice.
I'm a big Trekkie.
Okay, I got a quick question also. This may not be in y'all's area here. I don't know if it is or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Go for it.
How long should a final confrontation last between the hero and your villain? When you're writing a story and you're doing the final confrontation between your main hero and villain, do y'all know a time frame for that or what?
I think you have to really look at it from a pacing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you have something that's very slow paced, like a really great example is, I'm totally thinking of it. Had Jim Caviezel in it. It was a French movie. Mm-hmm. Oh goodness, I'm like totally blanking on it now. But it was basically this movie where this guy hated this other guy, and he ruined his life and put him in jail. And ended up
Monte
coming
Cristo?
back. Yeah,
That's exactly what I was gonna say. The
There you
Count of
go.
Monte Cristo.
Count of Monte
Yeah.
Cristo. So
Such a good
that
movie.
that one is a really great movie to look at from a perspective of slower pacing. It is very strategic, and the way that it's set up is strategic on how the story unfolds. It's almost like a flower that continually unfolds and kind of pull, you know, the petals fall off. It's very, you know, kind of deliberate in the way that it paces.
That's one
In
of my
a
favorite movies.
it's brilliant. It's really the writing, and I mean, it's
Oh,
one of my favorite books, but the writing on that film was brilliant. And how they adapted the book, it was amazing. But you also have things that are maybe more action packed, that have that, you know, like kind of like Kingsman. If you've seen like the recent Kingsman movies, they're very much action packed. They have that strategy, they have that unfolding, but there's always something going on, always something going on. And you have those conflicts throughout the film. And then you have that kind of crescendo at the end where the good guys win over the bad guys. And there can be a little bit more length of time in that pacing, but it can't be redundant, meaning that you can't, you know, in the Count of Monte Cristo, the very end has this amazing sword fight, and it takes a while. It's, you know, several minutes of them,
Yeah.
you know, fighting this duel. And because the pacing was very slow and methodical and beautiful, almost like it's almost like a sonata or not sonata, it's like music. It's like a classical music composition versus rock. You know, it's if you take music as an example, if you're wanting something that's more action packed, you don't want to be sitting there and then punching, unless you're doing Fight Club. You don't want a ton of, you know, punching. You want it to be, you know, something like Ninja, you know, where it's, you know, they're jumping off walls and they're, you know, kind of like the superheroes do, where they, you know, fall off a wall, a building, and then they come back, and then they, you know, try to get away, but then they, you know, the person comes back at them, you know. So you can have it a little longer. I think it's just, it depends on the pacing of your film and how you want that to the conflict to be resolved.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I asked is because, like, with at the end of Van Helsing, you know,
Mhm.
you know, at the end of it, where he becomes the he fights Dracula and all this.
Yep.
All right. Well, see, that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to
Okay.
figure out how long, because with mine, it's a horror movie. So, it's and so at the end of it, you know, I've got both. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, both the werewolves fighting each other here. And I was just wondering, how long should I let that last? Because I don't want to drag it out, but at the same time, I don't want to make it too easy for the hero here.
I think that that's just a matter of like what the story needs, like finding a balance of, you know, what is your relationship with the characters beforehand? If they need, you know, if they have a lot of a relationship before they get to this point, then maybe it's a little longer. You know, if this is just like a superhero film where it's a guy just fighting a villain, it can be a little shorter. It really just depends on the relationship you've built with your characters.
Yeah, and it also depends on if you have a surprise at the end. You know, like if you're doing it a length of time for a reason, and all of a sudden you realize that the one werewolf is actually a twin, and you're like, what the crap, you know, like something like that, where you don't realize that the hero doesn't realize that actually it's fighting two of them until all of a sudden they both show up, because maybe every time it turns around, or, you know, it's, you know, kind of guerrilla warfare where they're always trying to find each other, you know. All of a sudden there's like, wait a minute, how is there two? And then you extend it because there was a surprise, you know what I mean? But you don't want it to be so much that people are just like, I want them both to die, you know what I mean? Like there's times like I just want them both to die, because at this point I just want it to be over. You don't want that to happen. And I think it's all about taste And, the edit is going to be really important on that.
The edit. Automatic Blonde. I don't know. Atomic Blonde.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
They have some really great fight scenes in that movie. You could probably look at that to look at both sides. So for example, what Jon was saying, where it's just a random bad guy and they're fighting, but if these two are know each other, you can also kind of maybe watch that movie and look at a few of her fight scenes with Charlize Theron in that film to kind of get an idea of, because there are some examples of some that they're almost too long, and just as soon as you're like, okay, I'm tired of you guys punching each other, it ends.
Right.
So you could probably, that film has a lot of different kinds of depth to their fight scenes that you could check out.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that about does it. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you, Candice and Sheryl, for sharing your extensive knowledge of producing and for all of your tips and tricks. Great questions, everybody. And we'll see you all at the next one next month.
And you can always reach out to us. Candice and I, we teach our classes, but if there's something and you're like, I'm not really sure, or I see Jeffrey still has his hand raised. So if you have a question, feel free to reach out to us. We can definitely answer anything specific, or if you have, if you're still having, Brian, you're still having questions about your script, you want us to read it or something, just let us know. We're here to help you, and we want to make sure that you guys are set up for success, not only now in your courses, but throughout your career.
Oh, okay. Well, if y'all don't care at the end of it, to send me y'all's contact information into my student email, and then if I have any questions, I'll ask them.
Yeah, definitely.
You can find us on Discord too. So
yeah, I'm going to put mine in there, and then you can find us on Discord. You can send us, emails.
It's gonna be easier to find me on Discord. I answer like right away.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely easier on Discord.
Yeah.
So.
But I asked that same question on Discord here the other day, one day, and I still ain't got an answer.
Well, now you're gonna get an answer.
But like I've often heard a friend of mine tell me one time when I started at Northeast, a friend of mine told me, who was the GED teacher there. He said, the best thing you can do is get it down on paper, put it down on paper, and then go back and worry about the polishing it or whatever you want to call it.